and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy!
Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast of grateful transitioning with me, Georgios Panagiotis, and a man maniacally beaming at the future,
Ben Maddox. The curtain is coming down, Georgios, on what some people have called the worst year of the century so far.
Oh, I disagree. I think 2016 was a great year for atheism.
But I prefer to think of it as Mount McShit.
That's a fair way to describe it, yeah.
It's literally a mountain.
Yeah, oh yes. Yeah.
Constructed.
Do explain it. I wasn't quite sure.
Constructed.
Is it of excrement?
Yeah, but not just normal excrement.
Oh, it's Scottish excrement.
No, partly Scottish because it's shit.
Obviously.
But lots of different kinds of excrement.
But what did the Scots do to you?
Scots have done nothing. It's just,
Oh, they got shit on by the Tories, I remember.
Exactly. So it's this big sort of testament to 2016.
See, I thought you were going to say testicle because you love that word so much.
And what it is like many stratas of facies, right? a many facesed strated mountain.
It's a facetious mountain, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some of it's pale brown, some of it's dark black, some of it has got peanuts and little bits of bloody wood.
Yeah. I'm not quite sold on this being, the right imagery you want to conjure up right after Christmas, but that's just me.
Well, that's 2016 for you, Georgios. I didn't conjure it. Time conjured it in his horny, grizzled hands.
You have a very strange conception of time.
They look like horns.
Yeah.
They're not hands that are sort of sexually desirous.
All right. So we went from feces to sexually desirable to what's next?
I don't know.
All right. So is it the great unknown, which is 2017?
There you go. Tie it back in, Georgios. So it's the end of the year.
It is.
And as is the custom.
Is it because we've done it before?
Amongst us and other people of our ilk and people in many other realms, Georgios, we look backwards.
No. I think, honestly, looking backwards is what got us into this mess.
Well, it's true. I mean, pretty much everyone's looking backwards now to feudal Europe, Georgios. That's what people are looking back to.
Yeah.
To be honest, I am sort of psychologically a peasant anyway.
Oh, right.
So the transition for me isn't very hard. I'm not a sophisticated human being. You know what I mean?
See, I always felt I was part of the aristocracy. My dad used to say, the way you're eating your eggs makes you an aristocrat. Because I don't eat the egg whites, I only eat the yellow.
Well, you do have quite, a sort of patrician bearing.
Yeah, probably.
You sort of got quite the wide chin. You've got the flowing sort of upper facial hair.
That is true, yes, upper facial hair.
You wear your spectacles with an air of debonair.
Like someone who can do math just well enough to screw you over. Patrician, yeah.
Exactly. Patricia.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. I didn't mean patrician. I meant you look like someone called Patricia.
Patricia Clarkson?
Yes. I don't know who Patricia Clarkson is.
Well, neither do I.
Anyway, so what we're doing is we're talking about the year, what we liked. And we're not going to talk about what we didn't like because, frankly, 2016 has been enough of a bloody downer as it is. So we're just going to be happy and positive.
Which is what we're known for.
So basically, to begin, Georgios.
Yes.
I'm going to ask the question that across the lands people have been asking.
Yes.
How was it for games 2016? Because for everything else, it was a complete fucking train wreck.
Quite, yeah. Actually, personally, it sort of wound down the last couple of weeks for me. So that wasn't that great. But generally speaking, for the hobby, for the people within the hobby, I think it was a pretty great year.
How much did the sort of epic high watermark of 2015 colour 2016 for you?
I'm not sure. I think most of all, there were well, let's not be general, let's be specific. Pandemic Season 1 carried over for me from Essen into the end of the year, colouring a lot of what I thought was the highlight of 2015. To some extent, I fell into the same trap that you probably fell into, expecting a similar highlight. And it's not going to happen. Highlights are unique. You can't compare the highlight of one year with the highlight of another year. What we did get, though, were a lot of fantastic games to be really excited about, games that a lot of different segments of the hobby were really excited about. You had games like the huge games like Kingdom Death Monster, or you had like these really polished games like Scythe. You had games that, blew up on Kickstarter and were welcomed by backers that were really looking forward to it and felt vindicated by putting the money down and getting a great product. And there were a bunch of them. There was this great production of Max and Minions, which apparently sold out 30,000 copies or something, I've heard, in a couple of weeks. Smaller games to discover. There was Essen, which had a lot of great fun indie games. We talked about Mondrian, which we really liked. We talked about other smaller games that I'm going to talk about as well later. I think there was really a sea of fantastic games out there, and I think you shouldn't generally judge the output of this year with what came before, because it stands on its own and there's some great games that should get you really excited about the hobby.
Well, I thought that 2015 was an anomaly and 2016 was a continuation. Right. So you had these big, and the thing is, people expect this sort of kick on from things like Pandemic and Time Stories and these big sort of innovative games that come sort of seemingly out of nowhere and blow people's minds. Whereas 2016, I thought Whereas 2015 was this big sort of anomalous peak. 2016 was this great continuation of where 2014 ended. So you had some really super solid games and nothing that was completely mind-blowing and nothing that was sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Unanimously lauded as spectacular.
Yeah, I agree with that.
There was room for doubt within every sort of highlight of this year. But I think you're right. You had some really amazing games like Scythe coming out at the beginning of the year, and Essen was great this year.
It was.
But whereas Essen was great at the weekend in 2015, you were just like, oh, I see this and this and this. It was more of a slow burn this year.
Yeah.
It wasn't until you played the games a few times and then you thought, oh, these are fantastic. And then you had, you did have occasional games that came out of nowhere. Inish is a great example.
Yeah, I agree.
Of a game that sort of appeared, no one was talking about, no one really knew about, and then boom, it came out, had a big splash, and people are now playing it and adoring it. And then you had, Fantasy Flight did some really good stuff this year. I think their business practices are questionable, but I think what I like about Fantasy Flight, not all of their games are my thing, but what I love about Fantasy Flight is that even through this acquisition and through this desire to be the biggest company within gaming, they still make hobby games. They still make games that are challenging and long and commercially, in terms of, Hasbro games and stuff, unviable. And, at the end of the year coming out with the Arkham Horror LCG, which is just fantastic, was really, really interesting on their part.
I think it's quite interesting. I'm reminded of something we talked about, I think, last year. I don't know when we did that, but we talked about FFG. And I think they're not the business practice, but they're the business model, basically. And my argument was, because I like reminding people that I was right about something, or I feel I was right.
There are literally first times for everything, Georgios.
They are.
I one day might kiss a lady, for instance. The hope still remains, Georgios.
There's mostly one first time for everything. But anyway.
Are you trying to imply by that I'm never going to kiss a lady in passion, Georgios?
Well, not a lady, no.
What are you trying to say? Are you trying to say I attract slatterns? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, what I'm trying to say is FFG did develop in the direction I assumed they would develop, which was look where the money is and go there. They saw collectible games, they saw miniature games, and now you have Star Wars Destiny, which admittedly is not a miniature game, yes, but it's a collectible game because that's where the money is. And it's getting a lot of hype, it's getting a lot of excitement. It might die down again, I don't know. I haven't played it. Might be great, might be so-so, I don't know. But I can sort of see where they're going. They're sort of pushing the markets they feel are most lucrative. And one of those markets definitely is the heavy hobby game market. But I think the other strong push is the collectible, or at least a collectible market.
But I find that the thing I constantly admire FFG for is they don't compromise on making good games. Not all of them sit within my wheelhouse, but there's an aspiration there, it seems to me, to make good stuff rather than to make stuff that's profitable.
I think they have the proper belief that if they produce a well-done product, the customers will embrace it with open arms. And if it's a badly made product with little interest in, making it worthwhile, the money you spend, then customers are going to notice. And I think they're right about that.
Do you think 2016 was the year that indie exploded?
No.
Or do you think that indie had already exploded? Because I'm thinking of things like The Networks.
Right.
Vast.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Mondrian. These kind of games that are, sort of not just in terms of production-wise indie, but seem sort of seeped in this sort of indie aesthetic.
No, actually, I think it's probably the inverse, I think, is true. What happened is that we have more established professional corporate names when we used to have small 2, 3, 4 people companies putting out games. I don't think the games you mentioned, Vast, Scythe maybe not, but Vast, Mondrian, the small games, the so-called indie games, they've always been there. But they were the standard. But now we have a new standard. Now we have corporate overlords. Now we have Asmodee who have financial backing. We have bigger established companies with more than a small handful of people. I mean...
so the indie hasn't emerged. Actually, what's emerged is the non-indie.
Yeah. That's what I think. I think Asmodee is basically the big name right now, obviously. Regardless of what we fear about their overall corporate practices, customer side-wise, they're really good. I'll take this one, and that one, and that's all that fits in my bag.
But what about me?
Games we didn't play.
So, there are a number of games, Georgios, that came out this year.
Above 1,000, I think.
You played all of them, right?
Yes, all of them.
Literally all the games.
Literally all the games.
So this section that we're going to do is going to be you lying through your teeth, right?
Yes, pretty much.
Because this section is games that we didn't get to play that we really want to play.
Yes, or at the very least that we kind of expect might have made their way into a top 3.
Possibly. So give us one, Georgios. A game, I mean.
A game.
That's a recording session that I never want to happen, Georgios.
Again.
Exactly. Perfect information, lost tapes.
Yeah, one game that I didn't get to play, that seems to be all the rage, that seems to be really, really good, I've heard nothing but great things about it, is Terraforming Mars.
Yeah.
Everybody's raving about it. It was available at Essen. I was aware of it whenever I went past I think Schwerkraftspiel, which is the German distributor. They just had the sign up from the first day I came there that it was sold out and new copies will be coming in tomorrow at 10.
Right.
And about 15 minutes later, the sign was up again.
Right.
So it kept selling out, the German version. I think Stronghold
does the English. That was sold out as well by Saturday, I think.
Well, pretty good. In that case, I didn't have the time to play it. I couldn't just buy it blindly because my budget is limited. So that was...
And you can see as well. So yes. You could cover your eyes, I suppose, but then that's mocking the afflicted, Georgios. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah, but I'm mean. Terraforming Mars is one of the games that I'm willing to consider a great, great, fantastic game without having played because of word of mouth. Might have made my top 3. Only reason it's not getting mentioned is because it didn't play it. Might get to play it next month maybe, and maybe I'll change my mind, or maybe I don't.
I'm listening to more and more year-end lists and all of this sort of stuff, and everyone's talking about this game, and it's making me really want to play it. It's around my circle of gamers, so I've seen people playing it. I just haven't managed to get it to the table yet. I haven't managed to geg in on a group.
Right.
And it looks really interesting. Everyone sort of almost universally likes it, apart from a friend of mine who says, yeah, it's fine, but you can tell who's going to win from the first turn. And if that is true, that's that's a fault for me. But I can't judge that because I haven't played it. But that's what he told me. But yeah, Terraforming Mars seems really interesting. A game people are really talking about in their year-end lists, and it's always seemed very interesting when I heard about it, but I just haven't got round to it. And it's an American game, I think, and so a lot of these sort of American games are quite hard to get over here, and that's Clank.
All right, yeah.
And Clank seems like a dungeon crawler mixed with a deck builder that has this, and everyone's talking about this clank mechanic when you generate noise, and it just seems really interesting.
Okay.
And I'm a sucker for generic fantasy. I just am. I like it. And I like deck building as well. I find it an interesting mechanic, and I like the concept of buying and redrawing and that moment of drawing 5 cards and going, this is utter wank. I can't do a bloody thing with this. And Clank seems to just put a little twist on deck builders, and that seems interesting to me. Yeah,
I've heard the name mentioned a lot, but I didn't look into it. But now that you talked about it, I might have to put it on my list as well. Another game that I didn't get to play that seems to be really, really great is Black Orchestra.
You're going to have to help me. I don't know anything about this.
Black Orchestra is set during the Second World War, I believe, and you're attempting to stop Hitler. I think you're trying to assassinate Hitler, maybe even. I just know the generic, just the general idea. One, I like the theme and the concept.
Right.
I'm a sucker for shooting Hitler in the face.
Right.
It's part of it is, of course, the thrill of playing an Kill Hitler type game in Germany. In Berlin even. That's amusing to me. But I just hear a lot of great things. I've seen copies in shops locally here. But again, budget concerns and the fact that my list of unplayed games on my shelves is getting longer and longer sort of keeps me from picking up a copy. But it sounds really, really good. Really fun. Might be right up my alley because it is cooperative and I find myself liking cooperative games more and more. So yeah, that's a game that seems really interesting. That might have made it into my top 3, but didn't because I didn't get to play it.
Yeah, and there's a game that's on both of our lists, and I think it needs to be talked about because it's one of those that's high up on everyone's lists again, right. And that's Great Western Trail.
Yeah.
And I don't really, to be honest, I don't really know much about it than I knew before Essen.
Okay.
Except everyone's saying it's really good, and Alexander Pfister is really good, and he does good heavy Euros, and he does good light Euros. Mm-hmm. I adore Broom Service and Isle of Skye. I think they're both fantastic games. And, you know, it'd be nice to play a heavy Pfister game that I'm not appalled by.
Yeah, no, actually,
that's the only reference. Oblique, that's the only reference. And so Great Western Trail, and everyone's saying it is a game that feels like a journey, which I like.
Okay.
And even if if it feels like a well-designed game with all the cogs running together,
right.
Great, because that's what it is. That's what good games are, basically.
Maybe. I find myself, I feel very awkward saying this because I've never met the man and I'm sure he's a very nice person.
He's a very nice man.
I've played a bunch of his games. I've played Port Royal. I've played Room Service. I've played Isle of Skye. I'm sure I've played something else as well. I didn't like them and I didn't hate them either. I wasn't even like they were okay. I just distinctly didn't like them.
Right.
I looked at Great Western Trail. I've watched some reviews and I can't bring myself to be enthusiastic about it, but right. I feel obligated for reasons I can't really articulate to have a better opinion on the game other than I don't think I'm going to like it. Right.
But the thing is, I guess, if so many people are talking about it,
there must be something to it.
You've got to at least try it.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
I agree.
And I think, I want to try Star Wars Rebellion just for that reason. Not my thing. Star Wars is fine. You've got to.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I do want to play it for that reason, but it's not that I expect it to be great. As was the case in Terraforming Mars, I have certain expectations of that game, but I do feel like I want to know what everybody is excited about because people were excited about Broom Service and it was one of the most aggravating experiences I've ever had in a board game.
I think you're insane, but there we are.
There you go.
Just a quick defense of Broom Service here. It's absolutely bloody fantastic, and that cowardly and brave mechanic causes so much hilarity.
The problem with Broom Service is it encourages you to be conservative in your actions, and I hate it out of philosophical, political, just fundamental reasons. I hate games that sort of punish you more than they reward you.
I don't think it does. Carry on.
Anyway, yeah, Great Western Trail, not complicated, but heavy Euro, probably good. There must be something to it, and I'm always interested in what makes people excited about a game. So if everyone's excited about Great Western Trail, that's what I'm interested in. But as a gamer, nothing of it speaks to me.
Right. So I want you now to go through your list of games that you want to play, because we can't give a 10-minute treatment to literally everything.
Well, there's not much left, yeah.
And then I'll pick one out.
Okay.
Using my GameDar.
Okay.
That's a radar for games, Georgios.
Yeah. Anyway.
And then we'll talk about it.
Fine. So there are two games on my need to play list that I believe you have played. Cottage Garden and Feast for Odin.
I haven't played Feast for Odin.
Oh, right. Cottage Garden at least. Those I want to play because they seem fairly interesting. And I spoke to Uwe Rosenberg about it. And an interview at some point will be coming on the show. I just don't know when. Mechs versus Minions, even though last show I think we both said, we don't really care. But again, it's a case of everybody's being excited about it and I want to know why.
It seems to me, right, that it's going to be, and everyone says it isn't.
Yeah.
But it seems to me it looks just like a great contender for style over content, right?
I wouldn't know. Apparently there have been hints and insinuations that they're going to expand the line, take it franchise-wise. I don't know. Next year, things are apparently in the pipeline. So people will continue to talk about the game. So I guess eventually I will get the chance to play it and Cry Havoc because, I generally don't mind Portal games, but Cry Havoc just seems a little too, I don't know, something was weird about it. It just didn't speak to me. But again, a lot of people were excited about it. A lot of people loved it. And I feel the need to know why.
Right, absolutely. And there's one game that I desperately want to try and I desperately want to buy, but I don't really have the money at the moment. And that's Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition.
Oh, right, yeah.
It just, because I have an issue with FFG Cthulhu games.
Okay.
I don't think they encapsulate what the H.P. Lovecraft stories encapsulate. They don't have this sense of existential dread, right? They don't have this sense of you being alone against an indifferent universe. What they have is swashbuckling going around shooting monsters. And Mansions of Madness seems to be predicated more on building suspense and taking a sort of gumshoe element that exists within Lovecraft rather than this roll dice at a shop to see if you can buy a shotgun, right?
Yeah, I think with Lovecraft stories or Cthulhu stories in general, or rather Cthulhu games in general, it has moved from referring to original stories and more becoming a genre within itself. Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the things you play basically refer to themselves. So the Cthulhu games you play nowadays, I'm going to suspect a lot of people, when they play them, refer to Call of Cthulhu games, role-playing games they've played. They don't refer to the stories themselves, but to something that's based on the stories, which itself was based on a conglomerate of various Cthulhu mythos stories.
Well, it's essentially Indiana Jones with monsters, right?
That's one take on it,
FFG conceive it, and they are the preeminent Cthulhu game producer, right?
Well, they are the most prominent, yes. But now that, I don't know how long, a year or two, that Cthulhu is in the public domain, everybody's putting out Cthulhu games. Everybody's putting out games and then putting Cthulhu on top of it. So you're going to see the mythos and the style even more watered down, getting even crazier, even sillier. Like the Japanese game Time Bomb was rebranded as Don't Mess with Cthulhu.
Right.
Which I don't really care.
I don't have an issue with Cuddly Cthulhu. That's fine.
But that's just basically basically Cthulhu becomes sort of a color in itself with which you paint different games and less of an idea, concept, or a style, or even an atmosphere that you to tie into the original short stories.
And that's why I think so many Cthulhu games are easy to bypass. Right. And that's why Mansions of Madness interests me, because it seems that they're trying to at least convey the tension,
right? Yeah,
and the dread.
Okay, yeah.
Of the H.P. Lovecraft material, as opposed to slapping tentacly monsters on it, right?
Yeah.
And that for me seems worth trying at least. Does it succeed? I don't know. I haven't played it, but I would really like to find out.
Oh yeah, me too.
What are your New Year's resolutions, Georgios?
My New Year's resolution is not to buy games with crappy components in them.
My New Year's resolution is to design the hell out of a game based on me getting a bird to kiss.
Excellent. You know what would help both of us?
What?
Spielpro.com.
Oh, I've heard of Spielpro.com.
Yes. They give us money, which is why we talk about them.
Yeah, so Spielpro.com is basically a website that offers components. You can replace components in games you already own, or you can buy components to help build that prototype about me meeting a lady, going out and kissing her one day, maybe on the private parts.
It's going to be very funny if you can design a solo game with that theme. For some reason, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's going to be a solo game.
Clearly.
Well, actually, to be honest, I'm just going to buy some dice and that, and then watch some porno on the telly.
What, you don't already do that? Well, I thought that was what the dice were for. Going back to the original point of this bit, Spielpro.com for components, everything you need, either for your prototypes or for older games or for newer games that you need to sort of brush up a bit because your dog ate your favorite meeple.
That's it. Spielpro basically has everything, and it goes from sort of traditional card games. It's got racks for bridge, and it's a rack, isn't it? I don't know. I don't play bridge, but
I don't deal with the Middle East.
You know, it has. I don't even get that. That was amazing. And it has, blank-faced dice. It has replacement meeples. It has cubes of all colours and ethnicities.
Most importantly, it has a perfect information button.
And if you go, and still, I think this coupon code is still in effect, if you type in Perfect Xmas, you will get a 20% discount on your order. Perfect Xmas, 20% discount, Spielpro.com.
And now it's the Honourable Mentions
of the Honourable Mentions. Alright, so Georgios convinced me to cheat, right?
Yes, that's what I usually do.
Because we have this structure where we have an honourable mention and then our top three. But Georgios felt like he didn't want to leave out people. So we have honourable mentions of honourable mentions.
Yes, pretty much.
So what are your honourable mentions squared? All the mathematicians, that's real maths. So don't give me shit. I know fucking maths. 2 + 2
is mentions.
Infinity in the hotel, and you put people in the rooms, and everyone can still go in the rooms.
That was a very, very weird reference to a very, very dumb joke.
Mathematics, Georgios.
That's why I said.
Infiniton hotel rooms.
Basically, yeah. So, games that I played that I really, really love, but I had to narrow it down to 3 games and an honorable mention. But there are far more games that I liked, and I'm 150% sure that I'm forgetting a lot.
Absolutely.
But the ones that I did remember was Inish. It's not my top 3, but it is great. I've only played it once. I'm really looking forward to play it again. Might have made it to my top 3 if I'd played it more. The Networks. I really, really like the Networks.
The Networks is astonishing.
It's a great game. Unfortunately, didn't make it into my top 3, but mostly because I didn't get to play it again since last time. I might have changed my mind. I mean, I'm very much like President-elect T, in that whatever was the last thing I heard is what I believe.
Right. And the thing is with the Networks, just stop on the Networks a second. The Networks is just, it really is that great combination of theme and mechanics, which is a hoary old thing, but the game is really mechanically rigorous and very sleek and very enjoyable. But once you put that layer of those TV shows over the top, it really elevates the game. Yeah. This is where I think art is worth talking about here, because the art and the names of these shows really elevate it into something rarefied and interesting, as opposed to, just a well-designed game that has carrots on it.
Or Cthulhu.
Right.
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the games that it should be mentioned as one of the greats this year. There's also, I just recently got a copy of this one, and it was really, really great. Millions of dollars. Okay. I walked past it in Essen. I thought, it's a bit like Cash and Guns. And it is. But it is also smaller, more compact, and a little funnier without being silly, which is sometimes you're in the mood to point foam guns at other people, and sometimes you're not. If you're not, Millions of Dollars delivers a very similar thrill in a much smaller package. It's very, very funny, very, very surprising. We might get a review. We might review it next year, but it's still a great, great game. And finally, because I've been championing this game and I am going to fight for a review next year, I really like One I Dream. It's this mixture of code names and I don't know what's the other word, Mysterio maybe, where one person has a blindfold, everybody else is giving them one word clues to a card only they can see. The person with the blindfold needs to guess what it is, and some people are trying to help you, some people are trying to stop you. It's fast, it's quick, it's funny. It's going to be, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's going to be released next year.
Do you know you're really spoiling this review, Georgios?
Yes, it's going to get released next year by a big company that, interesting enough, also put out, now you need to know a bit about background, that also put out Cash and Guns and 7 Wonders. If you know who that is, hopefully I'm not mixing those up.
Catland PLC.
Catland PLC is in fact doing the international.
If you go to their offices, it's amazing. They've constructed countries out of cats.
That's impressive.
Because they've got this real thing about like cutting out cardboard pieces in the shape of lands and then skinning cats and putting them over it. Catland PLC.
Your imagination is not so much frightening as it is
pointless. Not so much frightening as absolutely the most pointless thing that's ever existed.
Yeah, but those are some games that I thought were fantastic, and I would be remiss not to mention them because they deserve mention. You should look into them, not lick them.
You should lick them too.
You should lick them if you like them.
That means they're yours then.
That is true. It's like donuts.
Exactly.
Yeah, basically these are great games. I really, really love them. I really want to play them again, but there are 3 games that I love more.
So for me, I've got a couple here. One that needs to be mentioned, which is it's definitely the best social deduction game that's come out this year. Maybe the best social deduction game, because it does what good social deduction should. And that is come in and leave as quickly as possible. These games that go on for hours, or these games in which you just go over the same movements every time, are so dull, but there's one game that does it brilliantly, and it mashes mechanics from other games, and it's short, it's 5 minutes, but I've never seen it not hilarious, and that's Gooseberry from the Mem Games. Now, I don't know if this game is going to get a release. I don't know if the few copies that were sold at Essen is what it's going to be, but this game is great. It fixes Spyfall. I always found Spyfall fell a little flat because of the pressure to come up with the questions. All you need to do is come up with a one-word clue, and then people have to decide whether you have the card that doesn't, whether you're the spy, essentially. And so Gooseberry is absolutely fantastic. I agree with you on the networks. I agree with you on, what else did you say?
Inish.
I agree with you on Inish as well. Inish is fantastic. I've played it more than you. My one is Gooseberry. If you get a chance to play Gooseberry, play it. It's an absolute cracker. Is that your name on the list? Well, get in there then. Get to the bar and get buckled. Welcome to the guild. Oof, Georgios.
You really exercise, Ben. Every time we open the guild, you're out of breath. You're sort of worn down by the heaviness of whatever's been going on.
It's an ejaculation, Georgios. It's an ejaculation that can mean joy. It can mean...
Right, oof, really? Oof?
Oof, that was amazing, for instance. Or...
See, when I think of ejaculation, I don't think of oof.
A vocal ejaculation, Georgios.
Same thing.
Not a sex one. Although, to be honest, that's part of the reason I'm quite as fatigued as I am. When, making up is quite an energetic thing, and now me and Janine are back on the rails, Georgios.
So you're dropping socky like a wet sock?
We're making
like a starched sock?
I don't know. Socky was a rebound thing, Georgios, and I apologise to her. I don't want to break Socky's heart, but there was only one love for me. That was Janine, Georgios, and now we're making up for our lost times. And it's and also Christmas was hard work, Georgios.
Oh yeah.
Because of her family.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to say they dislike me, Georgios.
Who would?
Because that's a massive understatement, Georgios. They think I'm possibly, and this was part of the reason Christmas dinner was quite so stressful, because her dad at one point just went, Janine? And she went, yes, Dad. And he said, who is that absolutely ludicrous waste of breath who I would rather chop into a million pieces and then dance upon his bleeding form than speak to at the end of the table? And she went, well, that's my boyfriend, Dad. And then he said, well, that's okay, but if I ever find out that he's touched you on your erogenous bits, which was really weird for a dad to say to a daughter, I am going to debollicify him.
Actually, I'm amazed that he can learn his lines. I mean, speak freely what he really felt and not, what somebody told him to say without getting paid. He didn't get paid. Nobody paid. I didn't pay him. Nobody paid
What?
him.
What are you trying to say?
Nothing.
You're not feeding Janine's dad a script over like headphones, James Bond style, during Christmas dinner, are you, Georgios?
No, I'm more of a born guy.
Born slippy.
Yes, sure.
Anyway, so, and he sat there and he drank more and he got more surly.
Yes.
Quite surly, Janine's dad. And Janine's mum was actually all right. She just said, hello? Oh, you are a twat. Was what she said, but at least she spoke to me, Georgios. At least she engaged with me.
She does improv very well, yeah.
And then 3 or 4 hours of that, Georgios. But
I'm just curious. Did you feel that the parents looked like Janine's parents would look?
Yeah.
They were very similar, right? So you didn't feel like they were strangers sitting in.
No.
They looked like.
And Janine's relationship with them seemed,
genuine.
Filial is brothers, isn't it? Daughterral. It seemed daughterral enough.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay.
What are you getting at?
Nothing.
Because
but you did feel like they were the real parents.
Because if someone were to elaborately stage a Christmas dinner, hiring actors at extreme cost just to run.
Well, not extreme cost. I mean, actors aren't really that hard to come by.
And just
I've heard. I wouldn't know.
Just simply to run down someone's ego over Christmas seems incredibly petty and small, George. I don't know who would do that. You're laughing, George. What's wrong?
No.
You got very red in the face all of a sudden.
Yes. I think you're right. It's ludicrous. Nobody would do that. And I'm just saying. I'm happy that the parents of Janine were as cordial as you described them. I'm happy for you.
And, it makes no logical sense either why Janine would pretend to, treat these actors as her actual parents.
Yes, no sense. No sense at all.
Anyway, but I mean, you've been complaining
sometimes
that you haven't really got a lot of money at Christmas because you had that super secret project that you spent all your money on and you won't tell me what it is.
Yes. It's not finished yet.
And anyway, that's quite sinister. And anyway, but afterwards, Janine said, "Look, I'm really sorry about my parents. They're a bit stress heads, and they don't see your inner intellectualness." And I went, "Well, you're right. I am quite the Einstein of my generazione." And I dropped a bit of Italian in there. Makes you sound more...
Einstein wasn't Italian.
Swiss. There's Italians in Switzerland, right?
Well, they're Swiss.
Italian speakers, aren't they?
Yes, they are Italian speakers, that's true.
Bows aren't Italian speakers, though, are they? Or Bang & Olufsen. They're German, aren't they?
I thought they were Scandinavian.
But we went home and she made it up to me with her...
That's great.
With her Christmas cheer, Georgios.
I don't want to hear about that.
2 words for you, Georgios.
Up, down?
Sexual Santa. Anyway.
No, that conjures images. That's uncomfortable.
She didn't wear a fat suit.
She did wear a beard, right?
Oh yeah, that was.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Gives you something to hang on to, Georgios, doesn't it?
Yes.
Except it was quite a lame fake one, so it fell off quite quickly. Anyway, so what was the guild question last time, Georgios?
The guild question was, what are your hopes for 2017, which is next year, not this year?
Well, I'm really surprised, considering, we wear our politics on our sleeve, Georgios.
Yes.
I mean, literally, I've got a sleeve that just says Karl Marx on it.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised we have such a Wall Street luminary, such a, free market Adam Smith-atarian as Phil, who listens to our show. But Phil was the first one to comment.
Yes.
And what did he say his hope for 2017 was, Georgios?
He was succinct and precise by saying he hopes 2017 brings impeachment, the board game.
Yeah, well, I hope the first part of that is true, and also the second part of that. So board games and impeachment for Donny T.
Yes, for him.
As long as, Stevie Bands don't end up assuming a stronger position in the world, Georgios.
It's exhausting to think about all the possibilities this constellation can go wrong. So I've stopped doing that, and I'm just going to wait and see, which is about as much as I can do, really.
That's all you can do, really, Georgios.
Yeah.
So we go on to miscellaneous hip.
Yes.
He's a man who loves a comment.
Yes, he does.
And what does he want from 2017?
He's worried that things are going to be more expensive, basically, which is, I think, fair enough. People are worried about things getting more expensive, especially, if you're in Britain.
Yeah.
Things are going to get more expensive.
Well, absolutely.
They're going to get very, very
because your currency's going to go into the toilets, Georgios, is what it's going to do.
Yeah.
And what else does he want then, Georgios?
Something very, very aspirational and uplifting even. He hopes that publishers will become more culturally and socially aware of gender and ethnicity. It's a complicated word.
It's easy for you to say.
Yes, it's easy for me to say.
You're pronouncing it as it's Greek. Everything in Greek. Or Spanish.
Yeah, ethnicity and gender, which, that'd be nice. That would be, I think, to a certain extent, I think it's likely to happen because they're normal people. They're not, evil, money-grabbing, mustache-twirling bad guys. Some of them might have blind spots, like lots of people do. But I think any fair feedback they get is something they will consider, because I do feel that more and more games do take these kind of things into account, want to reach out, do want to present product that is inclusive and that does not sort of repel people of certain social groups from feeling welcome.
And I think the first blows have been struck. This article about Conan, for instance.
Yeah.
People are getting out there now and they're saying, this is what I don't like. What they're not doing is calling for censorship, but they're highlighting things and they're pointing things out that may have slipped through previously. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that will make publishers think about inclusivity.
Yeah, because ultimately it's not that big a deal to have both men and women or any other gender represented in your characters. It's no big deal to have people of different hues games represented in your game, because it's a small, tiny step, tiny bit of consideration. And I do hope, not that I've actual experience, but I do hope that it will signal to people of different backgrounds that, you know, this is a hobby for you too. This is a place, this is something you can engage in, which you're more than welcome to. We're happy to have you wherever you come from.
And the growth of the hobby hasn't been carved out with people focusing solely on a sort of particular demographic that demands a particular thing, that we can all be included.
Yeah.
And as you say, making sure that just people are represented in your game isn't pandering, isn't a sop to political correctness. What it is saying, look, this is for you. Come on in, sit down. It's a lot of fun.
Exactly. You know, you should give us your money as well, which I think is the best reason to do anything.
Table over there with Ben. No, don't sit there because you know
it's not for you.
He's a bit of a knobhead. Okay, what did Mr. Wendell?
Mr. Wendell, again, money. In this case,
do you think he's still begging?
No,
because of those dollars that he collects. No, $2.
The problem with this reference is it marks us as very, very old.
I don't care.
He does feel annoyed about how's it called? Shitty automated elevated prices on Amazon. It's fascinating because I was looking at something the other day. Well, I don't remember which game it was. It might have been, I think it was Terraforming Mars. And people are scalping.
Oh my God, it's unbelievable.
Insanely over this game. And it's something that annoys me as well. It seems so antithetical to just, you know, the idea of games being about having fun together. And using the sort of this desire, this interest in one particular game and its lack of availability,
and people
make a lot of money for nothing.
People are quite willing to talk about, oh, did you see that X, Y, and Z is now $3,000 on Amazon or da-da-da on eBay? And no one is willing to call this shit out.
Yeah.
Scalping stuff is despicable. It's absolutely immoral, and I don't care whether the free market dictates it. To make £500 off something that you've paid 50 quid for on a private sale to someone who also shares the hobby with you is bloody despicable. You should be fucking ashamed of yourself, and you should use that money you've made to buy a lot of bloody bleach and drink it, dickhead. Because quite frankly, we don't need rampaging, immoral capitalism corrupting something that is actually of value. Just for once, don't think of everything as an opportunity to maximise profits. Be a fucking mensch.
Okay, yeah. I find it really difficult because at the core of the ideas, at the core of this practice is this idea of supply and demand, which I always feel was a misnomer.
Right.
It's always need and exploitation.
Exactly.
So moving on. Also, less Kickstarter shiz.
Because he's a rapper, you see, so he uses rapping things.
Obviously. I have never rapped and I'm not familiar with the culture, but I believe you. Again, he says it's becoming what DLC is to software. And yes, I can see it. I think it's happened last year as well. It's continuing to happen that some Kickstarters are still fantastic. They deliver great products. But you realize if you've been around long enough that some are just bad products that are just lucky to get a lot of money and then deliver something that isn't quite worth it. And I'm not actually, I wouldn't argue that these people producing these games on Kickstarters are acting in bad faith. But board games in general are a business that's driven by, to a certain extent, amateurs.
I've been pretty much satisfied with my Kickstarter stuff, but I understand that. So let's move on.
Okay.
Let's move on to Isaac Shalev.
Ooh.
What does Isaac Shalev desire?
He desires the positive trends to continue.
So I'm just gonna say just simply whether I think that's a load of bollocks by saying the word bollocks, or whether I think it's a good point by saying point after you read it.
Okay.
Go.
The decline in gamer funk and concomitant increase in bathing and deodorant use.
That's a load of bollocks because I don't really smell bad smelling people. Carry on.
Increase in diversity among gamers, designers and industry folk.
It's a good thing.
Rising bar for art and component quality.
Yeah, I think it's very high at the moment. It's not a concern for me, and I quite like the indie rough around the edges stuff.
Yeah, actually, I think I'm okay with quality staying where it is. I don't mind some smaller indie games to be a bit not quite as high quality and still deliver a fun experience. And I don't need every game to be blinged out to the max.
Right, absolutely. Most of my favourite games actually don't have huge amounts of bling attached to them.
Well, some of mine do, but I don't...
You're quite the capitalist, though, aren't you?
I am. As I said earlier about supply and demand. Continued spread of video and other digital tools for teaching games.
Yes, please. Can we have more teaching a game so I don't have to read rule books? Very good. Carry on.
No, I'm not sure I agree with that.
Why not?
I think I'd rather have better rule books than videos. I think videos... I think there's something very, very passive about watching a video. It's why, careful people, I'm now going full hipster. It's why I've stopped watching TV and only occasionally watch a series now. Is that there's something very passive about it, and I don't like... I don't know. It's no big deal for me. And I see the value in producing rule videos, but I don't want an over-reliance of that. I'd rather people sort of crack the problem with rule books and try to find a way to explain a game or design a game that you can get and understand as you play it or anything like that than having to rely on other people producing videos as a crutch.
I truly believe that the written word is a terrible way to convey the rules of games. Therefore, I think it's a flawed way to teach, and videos really help me.
All right.
Carry on.
Spread of board games in education and public culture.
Yeah, why not? Why not, Georgios?
I think this is the point where I feel most strongly in agreement with Monsieur Chalev in that, yes, board games in education, I guess, yeah, I think there's things to do. I think a lot of people assume that board games in education, and I'm sorry if I'm projecting arguments onto you that you're not actually making, assume that, things you learn are probability, statistics, something like supply and demand. I think, yes, those things are in games, but a lot of other things that are much more interesting, much more influential should be taught through board games. The idea of social dynamics, the idea of how to cooperate. One of my main arguments that I always bring up when somebody makes this foolhardy suggestion that alpha gamers are problem co-op games is that I always say they're not a problem, they're bad gamers, they play the game badly. The way,
right.
Somebody who doesn't think about who doesn't think 2 or 3 moves ahead is a bad chess player. I think playing a cooperative game well means knowing how to negotiate consent at the gaming table. And this
Absolutely.
is a very important skill to have. And this is something that board games can teach and I find very, very valuable.
And if you say, well, he's an alpha gamer, well, probably you shouldn't be playing with him because he's got to a point where he's never going to bloody learn or she's never going to bloody learn. And you just say, well, look, play something else. You don't work in this arena.
Yeah, I'm not quite that judgmental about this, but I see your point. Yeah, I can see where, you want to just stay clear of alpha gamers.
Okay, so now the negative trends that should end, Georgios.
Hostility, both overt and invisible, towards women in gaming.
Now this is interesting because I've said this many, many times, that my gaming group is pretty much 50-50 split down the middle.
Right.
Women are not included because that implies effort on the part of people playing the games. They're just there. It's just a part of it. It's just,
They're like furniture is what you're saying.
But it's just basically the gender isn't an issue and no one really thinks about it much. But people talk about it so much that it must be an issue. It's just not within my purview. And I don't think anybody could argue against a decline in hostility towards women in gaming. And if it is an issue, which I'm sure it is, the evidence is there for me to see, then we should stop and stop being dicks.
Yeah, I think the hostility, both overt and invisible, is not confined in gaming. It's a social problem. It's
no, absolutely.
A widespread social problem, and I think it's going to get worse in the next year. But yes, I agree. I think if we can do anything as gamers, if it's maybe not stem the tide, but do contribute in some small ways in making it, including I don't think it's enough to make gender not matter. I think it's more important to signal that, there are safe spaces and learn how to create safe spaces, like by either reading or talking or listening to people who do not feel comfortable, who do not feel safe, but making an effort to work on yourself, work on your gaming group to create safe spaces and not just, say, I don't care if you're a woman or not.
But I think it's a great aspiration to have one area of our society, and this is only an aspiration because it'll never be reality, but you should always aspire to the impossible because anyone can achieve the possible, right?
Yeah.
To aspire to have this one area of society that is this calm oasis where you don't have to think about those sort of things, and we can just enjoy the games that we play, and then we can leave and go back to the horrible bloody place where people like Steve Bannon exist. You know what I mean? And if I find out that Steve Bannon is a big Uwe Rosenberg fan, I don't know how I'm going to deal with that, Georgios. I don't know how I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah.
Okay, next one.
Crappy rulebooks.
Yeah, I think we can all agree. Get rid of crappy rulebooks.
Oh, yeah. I think if you get rid of crappy rulebooks, like I said earlier, I think videos become more of a nice addition as opposed to a necessity. And I don't feel that rules explanation in videos should be a necessity, because this, I really think, is a failure in writing in board games. And first editions of games that are fixed by second editions. Can we get it right the first time, please? And I'm going to say, no, we can't.
No, because they're iterative things. You can only iterate for so long, and then once it's that games are inevitably a beta thing when they get first released into the public, right?
Right.
Some games you feel like have got it right. The Networks feels like he's got it right? But you know, there a lot of these big complex games might not get it right, and
sometimes it's just, simple production errors that happen. So things that the designer has no control over, or things that were sort of messed up during the graphic design and they didn't have the time or the money to do it in the first go. All these things can happen. I have a game, I've now traded in a game that has meeples in the wrong color. I think black meeples, and there's no black cards for anyone. There are purple cards, so you sort of have to sort of mentally match those two together. These things just happen. They are unfortunate and they can be frustrating, but I'm willing to sort of forgive them most of the time,
and
unless
to fix a game that is eminently fixable. Very good and eminently fixable is negligent, right?
Yeah.
And his final point is how I feel about literally everything I create, Georgios.
Other designers designing better games than what I've been able to come up with. Seriously, it's very inconsiderate. And I don't know.
You have a conception of yourself as like the perfection of humanity, right?
Doesn't everyone?
Well, this is the point. No.
Why? Well, that's
because
really
not all of us can be perfect, Georgios, can we?
Well, why did we call it perfect information then?
Because you impart the information. I just flitter around saying swear words, Georgios.
I think you wanted to say sweary wordsy.
Anyway, so what's your plans for the rest of 2016, Georgios?
I might actually start hiring some actors to play games with.
It's probably a good idea.
Probably is, yeah.
Well, I'm going to go home after the Christmas stresses. Me and Janine are probably just going to get a bit of Westworld in.
Oh, it's good. It's not fun, but it's good.
And we're going to hold hands and maybe bump uglies.
Yeah, don't switch those around.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
No.
Sorry, mate. You're not on the list.
But they told me I was on it.
The honourable mentions. All right, so now we get onto our list proper. This is what we came here for, Georgios. This is what the people, the Perfect Information podcast listeners want to know, Georgios. They want to know what's happening inside our brains, what we like.
No, I don't think they want to know that. That would be disturbing.
No, my brain is a glorious pasture, Georgios, with little fluffy cows and little bouncing rabbit bunnies.
You have weird things to masturbate to.
Amazing. So, give it us, Georgios. Your honourable mention that just slipped in at 4th place and couldn't quite make it to the top.
My honourable mention didn't quite make it to the top because it was bumped off. It's going to be so funny on the re-listen by other games. Is Secret Trump. It's great. It's set in the Weimar Republic. Fascists, liberals trying to fight each other, trying to out-Trump. It's really, really good. And we had sort of difference of opinion on how durable it is. I think it's fantastic. It sort of does something. It goes into the same niche as the Resistance, but it provides much more tangible information, which is great for a certain type of players, namely the type of players I have in my weekly gaming group, who really flock to this game, who preferred it vastly to the Resistance, even though I think they're both great. I'm not sure I prefer one over the other, but they seem to go for the same idea through different ways, and resistance is more for the people who can read social cues, who can manipulate social cues, who can cleverly read and misdirect people just by the way they act. Whereas a secret trump just really works with tangible information, with, who did what. And you don't need to memorize it. You just need to pay attention what's happening and evaluate who's lying, who isn't. And you have some sort of base information to get you going. So my honorable mention goes to Secret Trump.
Yeah, Secret Bannon is one of those games for me that when I play it, I really enjoy it, but it's like certain movies. You go and watch the movie and you really enjoy it, and the further you go away from the movie, the more you think, oh, I'm not sure I like that. And Secret Bannon fits perfectly into that thing for me. I enjoyed it while I played it. We played it 9 times in a row. But
we did.
I just don't think it mechanically held up for me. And whilst I think it's a really good game with great aspirations, for me, it just falls short.
Yeah.
But certainly, I can't disagree with that as a choice. It's a really good one. So for me, I did something I don't do this year, towards the end of the year. And I don't know if this reflects my progressive attitudes towards personal hygiene, but I played a solo game.
Okay.
This year. And usually I don't, because the USP of board games, right, is sitting around a table having a collective experience with people.
Yes.
And solo games always struck me as sort of self-defeating.
They do appeal to a different crowd, yes.
But on a whim, after trawling YouTube, I bought the Arkham Horror living card game.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'll try this. And I've played it now with 2 players and I've played it solo. And both experiences have been fantastic. And as a solo experience, this game is a really enjoyable puzzle that asks you to manipulate a lot of factors. But this drawing from the doom bag is a wonderful element of chance that is just thrown in that results in these moments of tension. Even when you're playing on your own, you reach in, you pick the token, and you don't want to open your hand because you know this thing is really important. And if this goes wrong, it could fuck the whole thing up. And even on your own, that element of drama is baked into it. And so I found that playing this solo was rewarding. Playing this with 2 players, I was high-fiving the person I played with. The only reason this isn't in my top 3 is that the other 3 games are just better.
Okay.
This is really good. This is excellent. It's up there. But the other 3 games are just better.
Yeah.
So,
it's definitely pushed onto my want list recently. Now, you were raving about it. I've heard nothing but great reviews. And recently I was brought into solo gaming as well, because I'm very fickle when it comes to
onanistic.
That as well.
You can barely see.
Yes. So yeah, I'm really looking into, I'm really interested in having a game that I can play when, for whatever reason, my weekly gaming group doesn't get together, because I need my weekly fix at least. And
of heroin too, interestingly.
Yes, and they always go hand in hand. It's That's a heroin and board game group.
That's right.
We're all about heroines. And the second point is that I have a reasonable collection of Netrunner cards.
Yeah.
I really like this game. I did not play it nearly enough. I'm not fundamentally opposed to LCGs, even though I stopped buying new data packs for Netrun because I don't get to play it.
Right.
But if Arkham Horror provides me this sort of developing experience that you can use, constantly expand, and play on your own, I think it might work well with what I'm currently lacking.
And a co-op LCG is a great idea, right? You can just buy scenarios that interest you.
Exactly.
And there's not that sort of, I can't remember the term, but you've got to keep up.
Yeah, the metagame,
Yeah, make sure you've got the right cards in your deck. You can just do it for your own amusement, as opposed to feeling like, I mean, the reason I didn't get into Netrunner, because now I just sort of feel like it's too far gone. And,
I
can't enjoy it.
But, that's why they started selling these finished decks, like these, I think, decks that won some sort of championship.
Right.
You can buy them and just, play like that. It seems to work. Seems interesting. I've heard people basically say, if you want to try out, buy a pre-done deck, a winning deck, and then play around with it. And if you like it, you buy some more stuff. It's how most LCGs work.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Here we are, the end of the year special. That means, among other things, we've been going about this shit show for at least a year. That's pretty exciting, right? This episode, as you'll recall, is the point where we rate our favorite games without conferring on the matter beforehand, and then just hope there's at least one game that lands on more than one list so we can officially name it the champion. Congrats again to the Grizzled from last year, still an excellent game. Before I begin, let me acknowledge that I wasn't as excited about the pool this year as last year, at least for a while. I couldn't figure out if it was gamer fatigue or if the field of games was actually less exciting, but for a while it felt like coming up with a top 10 for the year was going to be a real stretch. But since October and the SN releases, I think we can chalk the board game output as at least one commendable thing of 2016, and there are quite a few that I haven't gotten to the table yet, not the least of which including Railroad Revolution, Feast for Odin, Colony, Guilds of London, Morocco, Fabled Fruit, Adrenaline, and Oracle of Delphi. So if you loved any of those games and feel slighted that they weren't included in my list, I haven't played them yet, so back off. Now, before we begin, part 2. Ben asked us to include one notable mention that isn't an official runner-up but qualified for a special shout-out. Mine is Gilhova's The Networks. I mentioned it in my BGG recap, and I still think it's terrific. I love the television theme, and the integration of its mechanics honor the theme impeccably. The only reason I think it's not in my top 3 for this episode is because I just haven't played it enough times yet, and a different player counts to see how long its legs are. I want to play the networks all the time, but I haven't gotten the chance. It's worth the mention, though, so consider it duly mentioned.
Now, Georgios.
Now,
We come on to the cream on top of the trifle.
again with the sexual metaphors.
The things that stimulate the limbic system, make the pupils dilate, and the genitals grow great.
A very, very good movie?
It's our top 3 games.
Oh, fair enough.
Alright, so we've got to give out medals. Let's use precious metal.
Great.
So we'll have gold and silver. And is there any other kind of metal?
Bronze?
It's 3rd place.
I'm TC Petty III, and happy holidays, everyone. 2016 was a horrible year for being alive because the conveniences and excess of modern life inherently paints anyone who complains about the political and social difficulties of living in the future as a hypocrite. But luckily, 2016 was a fantastic year for gaming, and a year that I missed out on mostly due to work obligations. I'm even recording this from my friend Daryl Lauder's place in Delaware so I can get in some last-minute gaming over the holidays. It's been finally great. Everyone says that I come across as a negative person, but I disagree and wish anyone who says that would die. However, for one brief episode of the Perfect Information podcast this year, I'm going to put aside all my deeply held reservations about the artistic state of the industry and the debilitating ramifications of our current political environment and list my top 3 board games of 2016. And in so doing, I promise that I will not say anything negative about anything at all. Number 3, Luck and Logic. I have so many runner-ups for this category, so it's not surprising that my first pick for the year is an esoteric, debatably valid Japanese collectible card game that is doomed. I mean, a niche title with a short but energetic lifespan in the hobby. I could have picked the great surfing game Tavarua, or Castles of Burgundy the card game, or the Manhattan Project Energy Empire, all of which I will probably purchase in the next few months, but I sincerely have to mention that game that I have played more than any other game except my number 1. Luck and Logic is a 2-player battle card game set in an anime universe where teenagers with special powers travel to different worlds and trance with the indigenous people and creatures there. That means they kind of get together into weird chimerical abominations to increase their power. So they become like an anthropomorphic jet plane, or a cyborg, or a half-woman, half-tiger, and then fight. Luck and Logic has extremely, quote, cute art, and is only mildly sexualizing teenage women. It also has an anime series attached to it to help sell booster packs for the game in Japan, and the quality of it is fantastic if you've never seen an anime ever. And the game screams for a second edition already as the designers make incremental changes to the game with each new set of cards. It's great, and that makes me crave more ways to abuse the system which they haven't introduced. What is there is fantastic, and filled with interesting decisions. Every action you take towards winning has an inherent downside. As cards become stronger, they take up more space on the battlefield. As you damage your opponent, they draw more cards. Winning a battle against your opponent usually results in all of their dead characters directly turning into currency they can use on their next turn. And most importantly, the mechanics used in the game are more important than any text on the cards. The game could be interesting and playable by completely ignoring any abilities printed on the cards and that tiny, tiny text. That's just how strong the central mechanics are. But those abilities do add a nice tactical space. The game ramps up perfectly, similar to Hearthstone, slowly building up your ability to place more powerful cards. And you are constantly able to draw new cards. In fact, by combining 2 character cards and performing a trance, you can search for any goddamn card you want. And because of this, hand management is much more important than OMG, I don't have any cards left to play. Cards have multiple uses, sometimes uses within uses, and the bluffing, press your luck battle system is just this work of genius. If you haven't played a CCG since your teenage years, this is the perfect time to see how the Japanese have modernized the system. Or you can try to wait a few years and just see if the CCG dies, which it most likely will, and then hopefully pick up some booster packs for really cheap.
All right, Georgios.
Yes.
Give us your number 3.
My number 3, it's very, very unfair that I'm putting it at number 3 because A, you haven't played it, B,
Right.
we haven't reviewed it,
Right.
and C, I'm not even quite sure if it's available in wide distribution right now.
Okay.
Not as if, hundreds of people are going to listen to my recommendations, but still, my number 3, because it's a fantastic game, it feels a bit like Hanabi,
Okay.
but different enough and fresh enough to be exciting, to be interesting, and to really force cooperation between players because it is also a cooperative game. It's a card game. It's called Creo, and apparently it's listed as Creus on Board Game Geek. I have no idea what's going on with the name, but the copy I have is called Creo.
From Sweet Games, right?
I think so, yeah. The same publisher that also did The Grizzled.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic little card game where you try to sort of play your hand down to get the combinations you want. You play natures that you fill with elements so that they can sort of build other natures to fill with other elements until you have put together a planet. The specifics aren't that important. What's most interesting is the way that the communication problem in cooperative games is solved, in that you can't talk at all, much like in Hanabi.
Right.
But you have these small tokens that you can spend with, and depending on how many you spend, you can either show another player a card, swap a card with another player, or take a card back from the discard pile, which is great because you can put so much information into an act instead of articulating what you want to say.
Right.
And this makes it really engaging. The structure of the game sort of tells you what you need to do, tells you this is your next stop, but you can't really cooperate with the other players. You can't say, I need somebody to play this and this card. You can't say these things. What you need to do is figure out what are the other players thinking. You do know every card in play is in somebody's hand. So there's no, there are no elements that, are removed. There's no uncertainty about whether this card will be drawn or not. Every card is in play. One of the other players has the card you need. You need to get played before it's your turn. So you need to figure out who needs what piece of information. How can I get it? And it's really, really interesting, really clever, really engaging, nice artwork. It's basically, if you've loved Hanabi, or, like the concept of Hanabi, but there were bits and pieces that you didn't like, the memorization or the weird way you have to hold your cards, then Creo is a great alternative. And even if you do love Hanabi, Creo is still a great alternative. I have both and I love having both because even though they're very similar in feel, sometimes you want something crunchier, which is Creo, and sometimes you want something more cerebral, or at least more thinky, and that's Hanabi for me. So Creo is my number 3 game of 2016. Fantastic game. I believe in distribution from Cool Mini or not. I'm not sure though. It's small. It seems to have flown on a lot of people's radar. And if you do find a chance, do pick it up. It's quick. It's fun. It's clever. It's great.
Okay, here goes. My number 3 game this year, the second runner-up, is World's Fair 1893 from J. Alex Kevern. Alex has become a designer whose name on the box now equals instant buy for me. Last year he put out Gold West, which also made my top 10 for 2015, and I recently got Dashu in a trade and enjoyed the hell out of it. In World's Fair 1893, Players take turns placing one cube of their color representing a supporter in any of the board's 5 stalls in the interest of achieving an area majority. When placing a cube, the player then activates any special helper cards to add or move cubes around the board, takes any cards outside the stall of the initial cube placement, some of which move the game timer clockwise, then adds 3 more cards around the board outside the stalls, again in a clockwise placement. Once the timer marker completes a full revolution of the Ferris wheel, players score each of the 5 stalls for cube majority, granting the first and second player points and potentially tokens of that color if the player has any matching cards that will grant in-game set collection points, and that's pretty much it. World's Fair is most certainly the lightest game on my list, coming in at about a gateway weight. It really isn't much more complicated than place 1 cube each turn and resolve accordingly. Why I love this game as much as I do is because with that simple action comes an impressive depth of decision. The game plays quickly, most of the time lasting about 30 minutes, even accounting for AP by the player trying to calculate all potential outcomes. Yet in that space of time, each turn elicits a meaningful decision. Rarely across the dozen plays or so I've had of 1893 with various groups did I feel like any one cube placement was an automatic choice. There are multiple considerations to make. The cards that you will earn when placing a cube, whether you want to speed up or slow down the pace of the round, if you even stand a chance at majority control in that stall, how much you want to diversify your tokens to shoot for major in-game scoring, and most importantly, I have no idea how to be good at this game. I lose at it all the time. Each time I select an overall strategy direction and do my best to move towards it, and almost every time somebody else did something better. And when I copy someone else's winning strategy from a previous game, somehow I still end up losing. So the possibilities are diverse and enjoyable. Finally, I'd like to add how cleverly integrated that clockwise motion mechanic is between the adding of the cards, the movement of the round marker, the scoring of the stalls, all of which are meant to evoke the pattern of George Ferris's colossal wheel attraction, built in Chicago that year as an exhibition specifically to outdo Paris's Eiffel Tower from 4 years prior. I love the unique historic theme and that reflection of it in the mechanics. I love the crunchy QB decision points. I really love this game and highly recommend it.
My number 3 reeks
Ooh, that's not good.
of ambition. My number 3 does not compromise in its vision. My number 3 is this huge, rambunctious yell of devotion to the sense of epic. This is a game that just wishes you to sit at a table for 6 hours and invest all of your cognitive ability into it. This game I admire as much as I enjoy for the sheer lack of compromise. And this game is The Colonists. And this game shot into my top 3 after 1 play. The reason I've had 1 play is because that 1 play took 6.5 hours. So this is not a game you play often. But this is a game that I looked at Essen. I didn't really know much about. And it's a Lookout Spieler game, and it has the Clemens Franz art, and it seems like another Lookout Spieler Euro, and they're usually good, sometimes spectacular, sometimes average. But I got this from my Secret Santa on Board Game Geek, and then I started watching videos about it, and I thought, this is what I want to play. This is the game I want in my collection. We discussed TI3, and I'm not a big fan of the game. I think the game is a bit of a rip-off by the end, but I admire the lack of compromise in TI3. I admire the way the game says, this is what I want to do, and I will not worry about structure to achieve it. I will just achieve it in any way I can. And The Colonist does this. The Colonist is Twilight Imperium 3 for Eurogamers. If you're a Eurogamer who likes Eurogames, go and get The Colonists. It is a game that starts off simply and is mechanically quite simple, and to pick up is relatively easy, but it just expands and continues to expand. And it becomes, by the end of it, this hugely complex puzzle that you have to navigate through, and it becomes a world, and you build a colony in front of you. And just as a side thing, actually you're building a village. Why they called it The Colonists, I don't know. Colonization implies something that doesn't exist in this game. What you're doing is you're building pubs and you're building restaurants and you're building theatres in your own village. I suppose the villagers doesn't sound as interesting, but nevertheless, it doesn't have those colonial connotations. This game...
Yeah, colons.
It doesn't have colons. And, you know, by the end of the game, you sit there and you feel drained, but you feel completely satisfied. And there are many things you can pick out. You can say there's too much stuff in the box. You can say that, you know, maybe the game should be more refined, more streamlined. Maybe there shouldn't be as many buildings. Maybe there shouldn't be as many different hexes. You can go on and do different things, but that robs the game of the pure joy of dumping all of this stuff out on a table and watching the table space get regularly eaten and eaten until you've got no space for anything. And that's why Colonist had to go into my number 3, because it's just the purest joy of excess. Second place.
It's the modest person's first place.
Yo, Mariner here again. My first runner-up for the year. My number 2 game of 2016 actually technically came out at SM 2015, but it didn't see wide release in the US until April of this year, so I'm counting it on this list. And I have to count it, because it is a game that I have loved as much as any other game, save for the next one this year, and only slightly less so. That game is What's Your Game's Nippon, from 2 Italian designers whose names would be sacrificed on the altar of my clumsy, public school-trained American tongue, so I'll spare them the insult. Nippon, a game in which players act as competing corporations vying for success during Japan's Industrial Revolution, is so fucking good. It has been on my shelf now for almost 6 months, and I think about this game and its various strategies constantly, probably the most of any game I've played this calendar year. Ben and Georgios reviewed this game earlier in the year, if you'll recall. I'll try my best to avoid rehashing their observations, keeping in mind that a great deal of what I appreciate about the game are similar thoughts to theirs. Nippon is an action selection, area control contest at its very core. There are many elements to scoring, creating instances of direct, sustainable strategy choices, like focusing energy on factory production or building trains and boats. But all of these periphery motions are meant to supplement and support the contest for control over the 4 regions of Japan on the main board. For instance, the factories are best at producing the highest value goods to have the largest area value, and the boats and trains mean nothing without presence in the region. What I admire about the design, though, is that with the area control component being so critical to success in the game, there are so many ways to implement an engine that will make a player competitive in that contest. Each player has various tracks like coal, money, and technology, each of which will help hone a different avenue for quick improvement. And the real joy of playing Nippon, much like the next one on my list, is watching the arc of the game and that engine start with limited capability and really get zooming by the end of the game, with multiple actions available before having to consolidate your workforce and start over. Yet there's never an embarrassment of riches, so careful planning is a necessity from beginning to end. So let's talk about that consolidation. When they reviewed this game, Ben and Georgios said their favorite element of the game was players getting to choose their own in-game scoring. I agree, those decisions are some of the most meaningful and most rewarding in the game. Then they went on to correctly predict that the lesser favorite aspect, the worker selection and consolidation process, would be the one that drew the most attention. I say they correctly predicted it because for me that is absolutely the case. In Nippon, each action is activated by selecting a worker from the action stall and placing it on the individual board. Those workers all have a distinct color, and when the player can no longer take actions or no longer wishes to do so, she consolidates by returning all of the workers to the bag and paying money based on each separate color of worker. Adding to this, the more workers a player drafts, the greater bonus will be at the moment of consolidation. So the game is a constant process of negotiating resources and needs. Sometimes a player needs an action desperately, but must weigh how badly she needs that action with the cost of drafting a worker of a new color. Or perhaps it would be most beneficial to take a few less directly needed actions because the workers are all the same color. So the player takes the long way around by getting some lesser pieces of the engine built, paying very little for it, and getting a terrific bonus once consolidation happens. I'll be perfectly honest here because it's the reason I'm naming Nippon my number 2 game of the year. I am in love with this feature of the game. It has burrowed itself inside my head. It creates such weighty, thoughtful decisions on every single turn and adds a fun tactical component to a deeply strategic game. I just cannot get enough of it. I think it's the best game in the What's Your Game catalog, which is not a small compliment since their section on my shelf is my favorite spot. I think, obviously, it's one of the best games this year, Probably would have been my number one game last year and the year before had it existed and I played it. And with the final game on my list is the only other game I played this year I think could probably be in my top 10 all time, which is currently sitting at about 30 games. I'm gushing, I get it. But Nippon has earned the gushing, damn you, so let me gush.
Number 2, The Great Western Trail.
I apologize to everyone out there, but this game has made an immediate impact on me. I've only played the game once. I've been thinking about it since. So take my opinion with a grain of salt, but the Great Western Trail has everything I love in a crunchy, medium to heavy Euro, and after a prolonged period of not being able to play any Euro games for months, this behemoth kinda sorta bowled me over. You play as cattle ranchers moving your cows along the dusty old trail, stopping along the way, and then showing off your prime beef specimens at the end of the road in Kansas City. However, along the way, all players can stop at different locations to take actions, one of them being build stuff for yourself to use along the trail. So you're building your own long line of custom action spaces that you can use. And you can put hazards in the way of some routes, and certain spots give you special bonus for building in those risky areas, and since everyone is traveling the same trail, it makes for some interesting interactive moments. But it can't just be that. Your cattle is also your deck, so you're buying new cattle to put into your deck. So you want to cycle through your cards to have the best variety of cattle to show off in Kansas City. But that's not it either, as your board is covered with your own discs, and as you make deliveries to Kansas City, or move your train forward on the train tracks, yes, there's also a train, you can start unloading these discs on your player board to make your cattle team stronger. And there are several ways to win, and you have to combine them and can't just do one thing, and there are a gazillion different choices to make. Each building tile has a reverse side to play with once you're advanced. It's real good. Just play it. I guess Alexander Pfister's a pretty good game designer. Whatever.
All right, Georgios.
Yes, Ben.
Let's look at number 2.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Now, number 2 in common parlance means poo-poo out the bum-bum. But in this case, it means second best. That doesn't sound good either, does it?
No. It sounds the best if it weren't for just one other that's sped by, like, right after it.
What is it?
My number 2 game of the year, last year. And as I keep saying, I love to cheat. And this is a game all about cheating, in a way. And it's a game that I didn't talk about as much as I should have to make people realize how much I loved it. It's a game that I've played a couple of times, I think more than a couple of times. And every time I played it, there was at least one instance of people just breaking out in laughter. Just tension and surprise and twists and just hilarity. There's not one moment. Might be one of the funniest games I've played this year. And again, it's a tiny little game. It does everything that I hoped Coup would do, and I feel it does it better. And that game is Hoax. I was looking forward to it last year. To Essen, didn't come out then. Came out early this year. Picked up a copy. A short time later, the German version came out, and I was kind of annoyed, but not much, because it is a great game. You're all playing. I think I've written a review on the website as well. I'll try to put it in the show notes. It's basically the original inspiration of Coup, and it's about claiming something you're not, in a way, in an attempt to either get everyone to disbelieve you and thus win you the game, or in an attempt to find out who everybody else is, outing them and getting them kicked out of the game. So it has play elimination in it, but it's just so funny. It's just it's one of the few games that even with my occasionally very reserved gaming group led to people jumping into character, claiming the most absurd thing in an attempt to say, I am in fact the distant cousin. No, I am the distant cousin. It's like a big game of Spartacus, if you want. And it just becomes funnier and funnier. And the strange thing is that there's a real threat to claiming something. Or rather to doubting somebody. If you claim you're somebody you're not, and you get called out, the only thing that happens is you cannot then in a later turn claim to be this person. Basically, your options of lies are reduced. You're not kicked out. But if you get everyone at the table to not believe that you are who you say you are, you win the game. And the fact that it can happen all of a sudden, out of nowhere, and it all happens because everybody's conspiring against you. Everybody's convinced, or you trick them into not believing you. There's something very, very funny about the mind game involved in that I have not seen in any other hoax-style social deduction type game. The way that you are trying to get people to think one thing about you, and when they do and act upon it, you win the game. And there's something about very, very clever about it that I just love. And there's enough meat to it that you get to put in pieces, you get to deduce, you get to argue, you get to be clever, and sometimes you just win by dumb luck because somebody is so convinced you're not, say, the cook, even though you are on the first or second turn. I've had a bunch of games end on the first or second turn because one person, usually me, was convinced that this was a lie, got everybody at the table to believe me, and thus hand the victory over to somebody who didn't do anything. So there's something I just love the fearlessness of designing a game that really puts all the power into your hands and just seeing people screw up. That's something I really like. And yeah, this is my number 2 game. The funniest game I've played this year, repeatedly, again and again and again. Funny, I mean. And I can't wait to play it again because it is fantastic. And that game is Hoax.
Yeah, so my number 2 worried me initially.
Okay.
You know, I sort of poked around in it and I found things in it that was disconcerting. And I got to the end of it, and whilst often things are satisfying, yes?
Are you just retelling what your proctologist told you?
I'm literally reading from the proctologist's report, Georgios.
Right, go on.
And they say when you're on that table, it's all very disconcerting. I find it quite sexy, but there we are. But I played my number 2 like an instrument. No, I played my number 2 once and I thought, oh, that's a shame. And then I played it more because I'd spent a lot of money on it, and it was the big thing at the time, and still is to some degree. And the more I played it, the more I unlocked it, the more I came away from it just feeling calm and satisfied. And my number 2 is Scythe. I think the reason some people dislike Scythe, I think, is the reason I adore this game. Scythe is a game that has been meticulously put together. Nothing. It is the absolute antithesis, ethos-wise, of what The Colonists is. The Colonists is very much throw everything in and see what happens. Scythe is about paring it away to its absolute essence. Scythe is a real vindication for me that very hard work in design can produce something beautiful. Everyone was excited about this game. Everyone wanted to try this game. And there is no question it is arresting. When you see it on the table, it's absolutely glorious. And for me, I saw that initial image of a mech stepping out of the mist, and I thought, I need this. And this is why I backed it on Kickstarter. But also, I didn't feel that there was any real threat to me because Jamie Stegmaier is fantastic. He's one of the best designers out there, hands down. The reason he doesn't get quite the amount of hype that other designers do is because he runs his own business and because he does everything else. He simply doesn't have the output that Eric Lang has, or that Alexander Pfister has, or that Uwe Rosenberg has. And so, people don't think of Jamie Stegmaier as a designer primarily, which I think is bizarre because Viticulture is glorious and Scythe is also fabulous. And there is a lot of debate at the moment going around in my group as to whether 2 of the factions are broken. And I think they're talking out of their arse. I don't think they are. And there is something about unlocking that puzzle. There is something about polishing that gem that leaves me feeling content. Scythe is not a game that makes my blood boil. Scythe is a game that calms my spirit. Simply in the intricate jewelry maker precision of what he's done. And that is why Scythe is my number 2. Some are born great. Some achieve greatness. And some
are the Perfect Information Podcast Games of the Year.
Number 1, Santorini.
I don't even think you can buy this game yet, so it's not really fair, but I don't care about consumers. This gorgeous, overproduced, true abstract game will be available shortly, and it's simply fantastic. The game ships with 1 million plastic building pieces in white with these cute little blue caps to mimic the iconic skyline of Santorini. The rules are printed on one side of a sheet of paper with rules examples, and they take up about half the page. And like all good abstracts, this simple set of rules and the ability to place your starting pieces at any spot on the board makes this game infinitely replayable. It uses my favorite abstract game narrative arc, which is not an arc at all, but a funnel. Allow players' initial actions to be wide open and seemingly infinite, and then quickly shrink the decision space as the game continues. The game board looks wildly different at the end of every game I've played. I've been able to recognize endgame patterns and strategies, but the way to achieve them is constantly in flux. My opinion on this game is probably tinged by the fact that I've been waiting 10 years for a publisher to pick it up, and this production is simply fantastic. And that's just the base game. Included are like 30 god cards that give each player a special ability. Each matchup between gods feels like its own game itself, as the rules change gameplay so drastically and force you to use your previous knowledge of the base game and implement it in satisfying and sometimes completely unexpected ways. I was kind of hesitant to believe that adding some sort of thematic asymmetry would be a good thing for the game, but after seeing in action, it adds so much to the value of what's inside the box. Some god matchups themselves can be played over and over and over. Santorini isn't just deeply replayable, it's a black hole of replayability. It's also the prettiest game I've played this year. I can't help it. I love Santorini. I will play it any time, and my friends are going to hate me, and no one's going to want to play it with me because I'll become better and better at it, but I will still love it forever. Merry Christmas, everyone.
And then there was one. Here it is, my game of the year. The game I have played the most times this year, over 20 times at this point. The game I promised you I would talk about again on this episode. I ruined the surprise, and I'm sorry. I hereby declare my favorite game of 2016 to be Terraforming Mars from Stronghold Games and designer Jacob Vixelius. This feels so unoriginal, since the game is making it to the top of a lot of people's lists this year, and has been one of the most talked about games since it was released at Gen Con this summer. I felt so confident last year picking the dark horse candidate with The Grizzled, and now this year my answer is, same as everybody else. I don't know if I'll say anything about it that hasn't already been said, but I want to talk about exactly what I love about this game. A great deal of the praise it receives is because it's a dynamite engine builder, especially if you work your way up to the drafting component in the game. Tailoring your resources and cards towards an engine that starts very small and ineffectual and eventually becomes a massive resource and money producer is incredibly satisfying, no doubt about that. Not to mention the wonder of beholding the red planet at the end of the game when it's, not red anymore. But the things I love about Terraforming Mars sit just outside the very fun engine building, and don't get talked about enough by people covering it. There are two things in particular. First, I love the function of the 3 terraforming tracks called global parameters in gameplay parlance. The game ends at the end of the round in which all 3 global parameters have reached their upper limit. 14% oxygen, 8 degrees Celsius, and all 9 ocean tiles have been placed. Every time a player contributes to any of these 3 parameters in any way, she receives 1 point on the game track, which doubles as a base final score and increases income every round. So all players at the table are contributing to the terraforming process, benefiting from it personally, and also expediting the timer for the game. I don't really know what word we have in our game design lexicon to describe this sort of mechanic, probably because I'm not a designer and still use phrases like crunchy QB to describe games I love. It's not really cooperative, and it's not really even semi-cooperative. The game is strictly competitive, but it's a competition that requires the efforts of other players. Especially in a 4 to 5 player game, it is impossible for a player to excel in each component of the game. You must tailor your engine to a particular productivity, and a lot of fun in the game is figuring out who's not doing what and focusing on that for maximum benefit. And if you concentrate your efforts too exclusively, say in heat production, that track will eventually max out and then there are no more real points to be earned from your engine. I find this balancing act intriguing. Trying to cash in at just the right moment and in just the right places, relying on the efforts of other players while also trying to outfox them for position, it's entirely compelling. Really, the game is only about medium weight, playing around 90 minutes, so it won't melt your brains out of your ears. But the arc that plays out over that time is as satisfactory as the idea of actually getting the fuck off this dumb planet and living on Mars Total Recall style. Also, Quado lives. My second bit of praise goes to the in-game scoring. One bit of points players can earn are milestone awards claimed by a player who reaches a mark, say, first to 3 forest tiles, and pays to earn the reward first. The other, and the more interesting, is the awards that players can activate. Out of 5 awards, only 3 can be activated at increasing costs. And just because a player activates an award, it doesn't mean she'll earn the end benefit. So for instance, one player can activate the in-game award for most science tags on cards because she has the most on the board when she activates it. But since it has been activated as an in-game bonus, the player to her left might suddenly install all the science tags he draws and take the award out from under her. I love this component of the game because it fits this alchemical mishmash of competitive cooperation the game thrives in. It has that same choose-your-own-adventure fun that Nippon has, but makes it a group activity instead of an individual one. And chipping into the process might actually benefit your opponent, not you. Just like my last 10 miserably failed relationships, I guess it's all about the timing. One last thing, a bonus compliment to my favorite game of the year. The solo game is fantastic. A couple episodes ago I argued that a good solitaire version of a game is one that plays wholly different solo than multiplayer. Terraforming Mars nails this requirement. In the solo game, the player has 14 rounds to completely terraform the planet, making it necessary to balance the resource engine across all 3 parameters. It's difficult, fulfilling when achieved, and oddly enough my favorite way to play this game. So it's a good game, I guess. You should probably try it sometime. That's it for me. Happy New Year, jerks. I'm Nick Mariner, on Twitter @TheGoodMariner, and my board game blog is iCallYellow at iCallYellow.com. Thanks for listening.
Here we are.
Yes, you're there and I'm here. It's an old Sesame Street joke.
El Numero One Georgios. The top of the pile.
You seem far too agitated and far too, I don't know, what's the word? Excited about this.
Are you just jealous that I can speak the Spanish, Georgios?
No, I'm not jealous so much as perturbed that you seem so erect about the prospect of talking about our top picks of the year.
Croeso number 10. It's Welsh, Georgios. I did a bit of Welsh then. That means welcome to number 1, Georgios.
Okay. Well, you might have
We have Welsh listeners.
We do have Welsh listeners.
They will corroborate the correctosity of my Welsh language pronunciazione.
They will corroborate that corroborate has 400 letters in Welsh and not, however many that we use in the normal language. Oh, I just dissed Welsh. I didn't mean to do that. Welsh is a proper language.
It is. What's your number 1, Georgios?
My number 1. It's a game we've talked about and I was excited about. I was blown away and I was still excited about because of its elegance, because of its sleekness, because of the way everything works together. It does nothing it doesn't mean to do, and it produces a fantastic, fully satisfying and complete experience without weighing it down with too many rules, too many decision points, or just too much chaff, really. It's not so much, boiled down to the essence as it is exactly perfectly fitting into what it wants to do, and it does not a bit more and not a bit more than it needs to do. And that game is Flamme Rouge, my number 1 pick for 2016. It's a fantastic game. It's quick, it's smart, it's clever, which I think is the same thing. And it's
tautological. It's tautological,
It's
Georgios.
tautologically good. Yes, that's what it is. I just think it's a great game. I mean, the high mark for me as far as elegance goes has always been the early Knizia games. Even though I'm not as enamored of them as I used to be when I started out, I do recognize that the elegance of play that these Knizia games have is fantastic. It's a high watermark that very, very few designers and even fewer games manage to actually live up to, but Flamme Rouge does. And unlike the Knizia games, and the reason why I'm not in love with them anymore is it's still exciting and fun. It's not a numbers game, but it is a game of risk taking. It's a game of going forth and taking something and just, putting yourself out there, trying to figure out who's doing what, and it works. It doesn't feel constraining. It doesn't feel like you're only supposed to focus on this one thing because everything else will break the game. It does everything it needs to do. I know there's expansions in the work, a 5th and 5 and 6 player expansion, and I think probably some other things as well. And I can't wait to play them. But right now, there's a 4-player game, and it's beautiful at 4 players. I just love it. I could not stop playing this game for weeks if people will actually, show up in my flat and play the game with me. But I really think if you're listening to the show, and if there's one game you want to look at a bit more closely because of something we talked about, my recommendation is look at Flamme Rouge. It is fantastic. And if you have more games to look at all the other games we mentioned, because they're all great. But my pick remains Flamme Rouge because everything about it just feels fresh and clever and engaging and fun. And it's accessible to basically everyone with the ability to count up to 5 or 6. I've even played it with my son, who's still in kindergarten. And even he just enjoyed picking cards and moving his cyclists along. It works. It's fun. It's actually, you need to go out and buy it. It's not a recommendation. It's an order. Go out and buy it because it's good.
Flamme Rouge vindicates design. There are a lot of words bandied around in this hobby. And
in this podcast.
Indeed. A few too many, some might say, but no. I don't think so at all. Prolixity is the goal, Georgios.
Yes. And is that where your anus... Is that...
No, that's prolapsing. That's a different thing, Georgios. I'm talking about...
See, you can see why I thought it might be, related because of the podcast, though.
Oh, no. I mean, it is. I mean, the podcast is essentially the oral version of erectile prolapse.
Yeah, basically.
They call that the pink sock in southern states of America, Georgios.
See, I would have thought they called it the perfect information of, body malfunctions.
So, one of these words that is bandied around is asymmetrical. And they say, something's asymmetrical. And what they mean is you get to do one thing that no one else does, but essentially you do the same thing. My game of the year takes asymmetry to its logical conclusion, manages to make a game that is engaging. It manages to experiment with something and manages to take an extreme form of something and make it work. And not only that, everything fits in. Its aesthetic, the way it plays, its aspirations, the publisher who publishes it. And I know that shouldn't make a difference, but, board gaming is something in which a one-man operation can go out and produce something that is truly wonderful. And Leader Games did that this year with Vast, the Crystal Caverns. It is everything I want. I've played this game in differing player counts and its character changes. It's a different game. At 2 players, it's a tight abstract. At 4 players, it really is this chaotic dungeon experience. And what blew my mind so much is that you are all playing different games. The mechanics are different. The things you do are different. But when you put them together, they function. And that is astonishing. So you all play these different games, but they all conglomerate into this one whole that is incredibly bright, incredibly satisfying, incredibly clever and challenging. And, it's a game. And also, I have a real bugbear about explaining things. I don't like explaining games to people. Why can't you just bloody learn them yourselves? Whereas Vast, you just say, here are your rules, read them. Because, I don't know the rules to half the characters in the game because I haven't played them. But the characters I have played have given me so much. And Vast in conception was spectacular, and in execution was transcendent. And that is really something to admire. And it's not just an aesthetic consideration. It's not just an intellectual consideration. Vast is also a brilliant game too. So if I'm saying go out and buy a game, you can't, unfortunately, it's not available. But when this game is back in shops, go and get it. If you consider yourselves in any way an aficionado of games or a connoisseur of games, someone who enjoys things that are original and exciting and just vista expanding, go out and get Vast, the Crystal Caverns from Leader Games. It is absolutely astonishing. ...2016 is nearly behind us, Georgios.
Yes, let me practice. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Good riddance.
You seem quite gleeful saying goodbye to 2016, Georgios.
Yes, I think I'm alone in that in that sentiment.
Been a bit of a shitter. But I just want to talk briefly at the end of the year, kind of about us and what we do. We really enjoy doing this show, and 2016 has really focused this in that all of this stuff, both in my personal life and the greater life of everyone else, this shitstorm whirlwind has been going around, which has really sort of affected everybody. And for me, and hopefully for you listening, this show has been a constant, something that you can kind of depend on. And we really enjoy it, and we want the show to get better, and we want to improve. And the best way to improve is to devote more time, and the way we devote more time is to have money to do this. And you are out there and you can support us. And you can support us by going to the website. You can click the donate button. You can give us money. But not just that. If you don't have money to give us, you can write us reviews on iTunes. That really helps. That attracts sponsors. You can tell your friends. If you out there are on Twitter or you have a podcast yourself, you can talk about our show in your organs too.
I'm happy to guest on any podcast. Nobody invited me yet, mostly because I stutter when I'm not sitting here. But I'll try not to stutter if you invite me.
Yeah, so if you like what we do, support us. Financially would be wonderful. Non-financially would be equally as wonderful too. And we want to get stronger and better and more adventurous, and our scope we want to widen, and fundamentally we want to be more professional going into 2017. And Georgios is going to elaborate more on those themes.
We have a bunch of plans for 2017. Some of them might actually work, some not. We've done the show in this current format for a little more than a year, and we're comfortable with it. I think some bits work great, some bits can still be refined. But I think we're going into brand new direction in January, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be very accessible.
Eye-popping.
Yes. Accessible, I think. It's going to be more of something that you can share with your friends. We'll see. We'll try new things. We hope eventually to expand into new forms of media. Yes, I said new forms of media. You all know what that means. You're not going to see Ben's face, you might actually see my nose. We are looking into how to get this off the ground, and it's going to take time and money, but we're really, really excited about doing that. We hope to actually start delving into some journalistic stuff as well. We'll see how that works out. We're just hoping to get people to talk, people to talk to us about games, say something that's not complete bollocks. Oh, there it is, swear word, about games, and hope you enjoy it and hope you get something out of it and tell your friends.
And basically what we want to say is thank you for, first of all, listening to the show. It still boggles our mind that anyone listens to this in the first place, and also all the interactions on the Guild, all the interactions on Facebook, meeting you in person. The podcast has given me the opportunity to meet people, to make friends, and that is all you. That's nothing to do with us. That is you actively engaging with us. So thank you very much. And I think we can all heartily. Now, what I want everyone to do is on the count of 3, just gently say, fuck you, fucker, to 2016, okay? Georgios, are you ready?
Yes, just to be clear, if you're sitting in a church when you're saying this, you need to stand up, obviously, because you're in a church.
Loud as possible.
As loud as possible. If you're at some sort of political convention, definitely do that. If you're around children, do that as well. Actually, there's no reason not to do it, not to stand up right now while you're listening to us on your car, in your car.
On your car, when you sat on top of your car listening to us.
Yes, or in your car, driving it right, to work or back home. Do stand up and join us chanting.
So remember, fuck you, fucker, and we're going to say that to 2016 on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Fuck you, fucker. Say goodnight, Georgios.
Nah, maybe next time.